There are 7 women, fewer than 10. That's less than 10% represented in this entire cabinet.
But now, for the first time, with a strong South Indian political party being part of the NDA and the coalition government, I wonder if they will even touch delimitation.
Can a government meaningfully, given the size and the scale of our problem, actually have a strong infrastructure and jobs agenda?
There is a problem unfolding in Jammu and Kashmir, and that problem will have to be addressed, just like Manipur will have to be addressed.
Welcome to episode 19 of the India Dialogue. We're grateful that you're here. I'm joined by my co hosts, as always, Mitali and Manu. Mitali is well known for her time at CNBC. She's an author and about to be acting director at the Reuters Institute at Oxford. Manu is an advocate with his own law practice and the spokesperson for DMK. I'm Ruchir. I'm the chair of School of Policy and Governance and CEO at Distributed Energy. As always, we're recording, talking about India and issues that matter. We've been doing this now over 18 episodes over the last few months. We've just been through an extended election, which with many twists and turns. The results played out opposite from what the exit polls were indicating. We did a show on that last week. This week, we want to spend a bit more time on the nuances of the states that also went to polls, as well as discuss what's ahead. How does the new government think about the economic roadmap and their policies? Why don't we start with the election results, because there was still a lot to unpack. Mitali or Manu, do you want to talk about especially UP or Andhra Pradesh or Odisha? Why don't we start with Odisha? Because Navin Patnaik was in power for 24 years. It was quite something for there to be a change in government there. Mitali, why don't you tell us what you think about Navin Patnaik's reign?
Yeah, I can go first, Ruchir. I think now the dust is sort of settling. The last episode, when we were talking, there was still a lot, being churning, in terms of the allies. That is clear. It's clear. It's a government that is now very much a coalition. There are two sort of critical partners. There are others, of course, but they have support from Bihar and they have support from Andhra Pradesh, and that will be critical for this government. It looks like, from the structure of what's happening with the Council of Ministers, that a lot of the key portfolios, which also I think was, there was a lot of buzz about what may happen to the Home Ministry spot and what may happen to a couple of other key portfolios. Both of or most of those, I think, have gone to expected parties. There are some omissions, some of whom lost their seats, such as Smriti Irani, who will no longer be represented in the cabinet, such as Anurag Thakur, who will also not be represented in the cabinet. He won his seat, but he is quite famously known for a lot of his pre-election campaigning and rallies where he made comments like "Desh ke gaddaron ko goli maro salo ko," let's shoot those who are traitors to the country. But it looks like he hasn't made it. I will make one headline observation before I talk about briefly about the two states, which is that, and I sat and counted this when it was announced. I mean, across this gigantic cabinet of ministers, and I'm talking about people with ministerial rank, people who are, Minister of State, and who are also MOS with independent charge. There are 7 women, fewer than 10. That's less than 10% represented in this entire cabinet for 50% of the voting population. So I really wonder, between all this talk of doing more for women and, of course, doing more for the girl child in terms of education, do we truly feel represented as a community or a gender when that is the percentage given to us? And that's one. The representation for 200 million Muslims in India in this cabinet is zero. the number of positions is zero. So that just gives you a sense of what the form and structure is of this new government. I'll say two things for what's happening at the state level, and then I'd really love to hear from all of you. On Andhra Pradesh, it's interesting that there is a new, or at least there is a revival of the capital city conversation. So that looks like it's getting a lot of attention. I was quite struck by two things, one economic and one not economic. One, that one of the first things the Andhra Pradesh government is going to roll out is free transport and bus rides for women, something that has been done quite successfully in Tamil Nadu. This is a bit of a walk back for the prime minister, who had previously in his election campaign said that he was completely opposed to the idea of free bus rides for women, and he actually made that comment saying, bus free kar di, metro khali kar di, mujhe ye nahi karna hai. The opposition basically made bus rides free for women, and that's rendered metros empty, which is not factually correct. But I won't do it. So that's it's a small one, but I think it's a good indicator of the fact that a lot of accommodations will have to be made in a coalition government. And the other one, quite interestingly, is that N. Chandrababu Naidu's son, Lokesh Naidu, also made the comment that he and his father were targeted by Pegasus, which, as many may know and have read, is a spyware that was allegedly installed in the phones of both opposition leaders and civil society leaders to essentially spy on them. They believe this was done by the opposition state government, but I think it would be very, very interesting to see that appear as a national topic now, because that's something that the BJP and also frankly the court has just pushed to the wayside. And it is a very, very serious issue, not just because it is a violation of privacy, but because it has very deep consequences for India as a democracy. So that's some of the key trends in Andhra Pradesh. And on Odisha as well, I think it's a big change of guard. I think in that one, that's probably the one where the exit polls got it right, where a lot of people were quite shocked at the numbers that were being accorded to the BJP, saying this doesn't look right. But that one was accurate, and I think it's a big change of guard for the state, for Naveen Patnaik. I will say it will be interesting to see what happens on governance, because one doesn't hear that much at the national level as a discourse about Odisha. But what a lot of people who were involved in welfare work there would always tell me anecdotally is that when there are extreme weather events, cyclones and things like that, the Odisha government has actually been spectacular in terms of its welfare work, in terms of supporting those who are in vulnerable places within the state, and then rehabilitation after that. So I think that's a key issue for a state like Odisha, and I'd be keen to see how that progresses. Manu, how did you assess
Let
it?
me let me start from Odisha and then maybe
Yeah.
build up across the country, because Odisha, as you said, after 24 odd years, change of guard at the top is something, uh, seems like it was time, just because there would have been multiple layers of anti-incumbency building up. But Naveen Patnaik and the Janata Dal were so unshakable, undefeatable there, that it just never seemed like it was going to happen, right? But perhaps there is a takeaway in it for every political organization there, that unless you need to keep reinventing, and you need to keep also clearly marking your boundaries. My concern has always been, in the last 5 years of the second Modi government, BJD essentially provided outside support in all key legislation, be it Article 370, Citizenship Amendment Act, many others. In fact, there were some which were on the even Stevens between the two opposition and the ruling party in Rajya Sabha, and it was the support of BJD and YSR Congress, so Jagan's party, which actually helped the BJP pass through some very controversial legislation. So therefore, I think there's a story in there as well, that you cannot support or provide outside support for 5 years and then try to enter into alliance talks, which BJP and BJD tried to. months before the election, and that failed. And then start positioning yourself against each other, right? So I think there I think maybe after 24 years, maybe Mr. Patnaik didn't read the way the wind was blowing. Beyond that, there's a new chief minister there, someone from a marginalized community. And there is also, sorry, just going back to, there's a good CSDS Lokniti post poll survey which showed that every category, men, women, across communities, seem to vote more for the BJP in this election. So it seemed like BJP won, hands down across the board, not just with one particular community there. A lot of people have also attributed it to the last minute sort of uh, Oriya Asmita or Oriya Pride campaign that the BJP did, where they targeted the assistant aide to the chief minister, a former bureaucrat by the name V.K. Pandian, who's from Tamil Nadu, but who's been working in the Odisha cadre, who's married to a person who works with the Odisha cadre, and sort of targeting that this person may, sort of call the shots if Mr. Patnaik was to be re-elected. And there again, we often have this great question of whether people who are leaving, people who are sort of on the verge of retirement, should name their successor or should anoint a successor. But um, Patnaik clearly said that he will not appoint or name a successor. And perhaps that does also create a little bit of confusion. People do not know what they're voting for should something happen to a person who's clearly old, and so on. So all of those combined, I think Odisha was a very interesting sort of state, because BJP gained tremendously from Odisha, a lot of momentum, a lot of MPs. Of course, the other state that helped the BJP traditionally, where BJP hasn't done well, is Andhra, and that is by and large because of the alliance with the Telugu Desam party, Chandrababu Naidu's party, who clearly enjoyed a huge wave election there. They swept the elections out of 170 odd seats. I think they won almost 150 something or close to 160. The ruling party, the YSRCP, was reduced to 11 seats from a majority. Complete obliteration in the state assembly and also the parliamentary seats there. Again, YSRCP tacitly, outwardly, from outside, supported the BJP over the last 5 years. So I don't really see that they also read the mood. They didn't actually take strong positions against the government. Thereby, people are really not clear what they're voting for, right? So I think that also would have contributed. The other state which sort of confused me was Delhi, because it seemed like Delhi would vote differently this time for two reasons. One, because that Aam Aadmi Party has been such a dominant force there in the last 8 to 10 years, and secondly, because the Aam Aadmi Party and Congress sort of combined for the first time, and thirdly, because we expect some level of sympathy around the arrests of senior Aam Aadmi Party ministers, including the sitting chief minister Kejriwal, right? So on all those accounts, it just all those counts, we thought there might be at least a little bit of a change, but no, it BJP won all 7 seats like they did in 2019. So that was a surprise. But of course, overall for me, Ruchir, I think the takeaway was, I think definitely a revived, if not resurgent, Congress. Go up from 45 seats to 99, I think. So they've done really well, and of course, pushed the overall tally of the India alliance to almost 240 seats. So it'll be a much more robust opposition. Um, Other than that, I think there are a couple of other sort of things which are going forward. The government has to be a coalition government. So very interesting situation for Mr. Modi, Mr. Shah, because they've not really worked with a coalition. Somebody pointed out to me the other day that though they had a National Democratic Alliance in name, they've not actually called a meeting in the last 5 years, or there's not a person who's been appointed as a convener or any such in that alliance. So now they will have to, at least they have to sort of ensure that all parties are taken into confidence. they are supported by two heavyweight political leaders, so Nitish Kumar and Chandrababu Naidu. So, I think the fact that Mr. Modi, Mr. Shah all made it down to Andhra Pradesh for the swearing in of Chandrababu Naidu is a huge signal. I can't remember the last time Mr. Modi went to a swearing in of a state chief minister. Usually, one of the other leaders or the senior BJP party leaders go, but Mr. Modi, Mr. Amit Shah, Mr. JP Nadda, the entire sort of BJP, and half the senior leaders of the cabinet were there, just showing that how this new alliance regime has begun. I think there's a couple of other minor stats people have pointed out that, of course, this is a record voter turnout because our population has grown, so more people are eligible to vote. That's obvious, and we don't have the exact numbers yet, but as we predicted in a few shows earlier, the amount of money that is spent on internet, digital media, marketing, etc., huge, right? Literally, thousands of crores. So I'm waiting to see those estimates come out. But I would say the big gains are, I think, some of the other regional parties whom people thought wouldn't do well, which are NCP Sharad Pawar and Uddhav Thackeray Shiv Sena, Samajwadi Party, and Trinamool Congress. Like I always said last time to DMK, most polls predicted a very high seat share for us, and that was sort of how it stayed. But these three parties, they were not given the numbers, so I think they performed better than most people even thought they would. And I think that's a very interesting sign of things, because that just shows that the opposition voice will be difficult to keep down in parliament. And keep in mind, Maharashtra goes to elections very soon, I think in 2 or 3 months. So it'll be very interesting to see how that works. Of course, I think Uttar Pradesh, now that Akhilesh has decided he will give up his MLA seat in Uttar Pradesh and continue to be a rather big be a member of parliament for the next 3 years, he will make sure that Uttar Pradesh, issues are highlighted in parliament day in day out, right? Because that's the way he can get back to Uttar Pradesh for the next assembly election there in 2027. So I think it's a very smart move. And of course, Trinamool has always sent firebrand parliamentarians, and I think someone like Mohua Moitra coming back after how she was sort of disqualified, and many people would feel like I do very unfairly. I think just to see her back would be very interesting, and there will be plenty of fireworks in the next parliament session, which begins on the 27th of June, which is mostly ceremonial because it is people just taking swearing in as new MPs, and also, of course, like a interim budget being passed. But I think those fireworks will begin right there. Ruchir, your thoughts maybe on regional parties and also national government takeaway?
I mean, I think Mitali made a really articulate point last episode when we recorded that, look, it is possible to have a coalition government and get things done. Obviously, the famous example of the Congress government from 91 and the economic liberalization that followed. Atal Bihari Vajpayee ran a government full of coalitions. So it is possible to run a reasonable government. Obviously, Prime Minister Modi is not used to it. Like, this is the first time that they have to rely on other partners. So it will be interesting. I think, like, just anecdotally, the people I spoke to, the general mood of the country felt like, oh, BJP felt like they were getting too powerful, and this was a really good way to at least find some balance where they're not running away in the direction they want to. They now have to talk to other people and actually placate or be like be closer to the center in the way they think about the world, because they have to actually talk to others about it. So let's see how it plays out. There's a couple of comments I wanted to pick up on in terms of Manu and Mitali, your comments. In the anti-incumbency piece, one of the interesting things is that Chandrababu Naidu has a really strong reputation as a growth center or development focused person, and historically he is somebody who was seen as a, Modi, like a possible Modi like personality, with the Modi story being around Gujarat, Chandrababu Naidu story around Andhra Pradesh. So it is not surprising that when they came back with the majority that they did. um, Two pieces I want to ask both of you about. One is obviously the elections in Kashmir and the results there, and two chief ministers lost the seats they were contesting. I'm curious about what both of you think about that. And the other question I had was around uh, um, Ayodhya, and I mean in the wider UP context. How do, like, the reports I have read was that the sitting BJP MP in Ayodhya was completely disconnected from the local constituents, and obviously a lot of the work that happened around the temple didn't necessarily translate to goodwill with people. I want to unpack those two pieces before we move on from election results. I'm curious, Mitali, do you have a view, especially around the Kashmir results? What are your thoughts on how that's
Yeah,
playing out?
I just want to make a quick couple of comments, Ruchir. On Manu's point about Delhi, I think it's quite fascinating how Delhi chose to vote, and I can offer a couple of sort of observations around it. One is anecdotal, and the other is what the data is pointing to. I think, and I am sorry I forget, and I would really love to sort of give credit to the whoever. Mind this data, because it's either Roshan Kishore from the Hindustan Times or Udit Mishra from Indian Express. In the post polling data that came out, first of all, it is very clear that the Muslim community, because it's such lazy analysis to say that the Muslims voted en masse for the Congress, because it is not the case. In different regions, they have voted for what they have seen as the best possible option. So sometimes it's a regional party. In some places, it is the Congress. In Uttar Pradesh, of course, the binding factor was that it was a Congress SP combine, and they voted there. But the one block that over time has been patently clear about their voting pattern is the upper caste Hindu vote, and that has always gone to the BJP. And that pattern remained this time. So two things: one, that in the urban rural divide, urban India was far more pro BJP in terms of its vote. And secondly, if there is one voting bloc that can be identified through history, it is the upper class Hindu vote. And I think that was definitely at play in Delhi. I think Delhi makes a critical differentiation when it goes to vote for its own, for state elections versus general elections. And it was an overwhelming sort of sign of support for the BJP. And I'll tell you, the anecdotal piece for me, which really struck me and got me thinking, is that earlier this year I was visiting India, and as I was traveling, particularly around parts of South Delhi, which is considered, socio-economically a pretty well-off segment, I noticed that across neighborhoods and across housing societies, all of them on their gates and balconies had saffron flags hoisted, which had probably been distributed, either in the run up to the Ayodhya temple celebration or after that. But I have lived in Delhi for many decades, and I personally have never seen such a visible display of support for the religion. I mean, of course, people have all their religious festivals and festivities and that, but I had not seen this kind of a display via flags and things so prominently. And I don't mean this as a critique, or that what someone should or shouldn't do. I just mean this as an observation of what I saw across Delhi, and it looked to me like there was very clear communication about support for the BJP and large parts of its policy, and of course support for its religious approach towards the Ayodhya temple, and that was one of their key voting plans planks. So I feel like that really worked in favor of BJP in Delhi. On the rest of it, Ruchir, I think honestly, just like Manipur, Kashmir is going to become a festering wound. There is a reason that the BJP chose not to participate in these elections. There is a reason that state elections have not been held, and to my mind, that reason is a lack of confidence of what is going on in the valley. And if you were to play back what has happened in the last few months, even by way of a spurt in violent incidents involving police forces or involving civilians, I think that there is a problem unfolding in Jammu and Kashmir, and that problem will have to be addressed, just like Manipur will have to be addressed. I don't think you can ignore it and go ahead with elections. It was very interesting to see, two former chief ministers lose. One of whom actually wrote a very gracious note on Twitter about who he had lost to. That gentleman has been jailed and has apparently been a really positive force while being in jail. So I think with JNK, Ruchir, it's less about who lost their seat and more about looking forward and just analyzing what the potential solution will be. But I'm sure Manu has much more on what this means for that state in the national dynamic.
I think totally Kashmir is so interesting because essentially now, in the five seats that went to polls there, you have such interesting sort of contestations. But really, if you look at it in two parts, in Jammu and Kashmir. In Kashmir, as you rightly pointed out, in Srinagar and Anantnag, you had essentially national conference and PDP fight each other, right? Both are sort of on the opposite side of the BJP. And of course, in Baramulla, where Omar Abdullah lost, he lost to Engineer Rashid, who has been in jail for some time now under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So very interesting that people of Baramulla, and they turned out in some, I think, record numbers, as we discussed in an earlier show, around 60% turnout there, which is extraordinary considering its history. They decided to sort of throw in their lot with somebody who is in jail, and they felt he resonated their own voice better than others, like a former chief minister and leader of the national conference. So very interesting. I don't know how this will sort of, in a sense, turn out, in how this will play out in parliament. But I think Kashmir again. If you go back to our one of our conversations on Article 370, I remember us discussing how the government then, and of course the government now, right, the BJP government, NDA government now, had undertaken to the Supreme Court of India that they will restore statehood in Kashmir. So again, how will these issues play out in Parliament when the Kashmir MPs come and have their say? So I think that's an interesting, I think, sort of battle within a battle, or a episode within an episode, that we will get to see in the months to come. Ruchir, I was going to ask you also about any particular takeaways for you from the southern states, because one of the things I noticed is, so with Chandrababu Naidu being such a crucial part of the government, right, and is now newfound sort of close engagement with the NDA. Andhra Pradesh is actually, according to our earlier calculations, would have lost about 2 to 3 seats if delimitation was to take place. And just keep in mind that the delimitation deadline is 2026. But now, for the first time, with a strong South Indian political party being part of the NDA and the coalition government, I wonder if they will even touch delimitation, right? Because I can't see any person in South India agreeing to lose, for their state to lose seats. So again, it's an interesting sort of, I think, position for Amit Shah and Mr. Modi. And the other issue will, of course, be things like one nation, one election. So I don't know if Nitish will agree for, say, one nation, one election, right? He may not want to actually throw in his lot with the BJP come next election, or why would he sort of agree to not have his own state election go separately? So I think these are all interesting sort of um, possible, I guess, but necessary issues that the new coalition government will have to deal with.
It's an interesting one, right? I think one of the things I want to hear from you is like, what is like DMK opposition look like now? I mean, AIA DMK is completely wiped out in some ways. The other thing that was interesting for me was the Karnataka mixed results. I mean, effectively, uh, it doesn't feel like there's a clear outcome in terms of where Karnataka goes from here, especially with Yedurappa in charge in the BJP. And then the last one is, I mean, BJP did break through finally in one of the two big states they have not been able to so far, which is Kerala and Tamil Nadu. They have one seat, but Kerala continues to be, left dominated. Congress also struggled to make inroads. So I thought Congress will do more than they did, and that was a surprise for me. So I think for me the like how does that play out in terms of the political fortunes? I think at least in the BJP seat now, I would prioritize working in alliances in the two states because it is clear it is difficult for BJP to break through there and continue to build on the strength they have in the Hindi heartland. So, I think the one, like I know you said at the beginning of the show, Manu, that Congress did well. In my head, I still don't compute it as Congress did well. I think the India Alliance did well. And the difference for me is this, that Congress actively chose to partner with regional political parties and take them, like work with them closely to try and do better as an opposition. The alliance strategy paid dividends this time in this election. So I think there's something to learn from that in terms of BJP's plan of action in the south. But before we move on from this topic, any comments on UP and where like what both of you think around the Uttar Pradesh results? Like the Akhilesh Yadav piece, I had heard rumors that they had done really well, but obviously the exit polls really removed that idea completely, and it was a surprise in the end in terms of the results and what happened there.
Mithali, do you want to go?
Yeah, um, I can. I just have like a couple of brief observations about that. One, Ruchir, and I'm so glad. Actually, I just want to say that before anything else, I'm so glad for so much granular, detailed post-election analysis. Because honestly, before that, it's a mug's game. You're just shooting in the air with no real target or sight. It's so good to see so much strong analysis emerge post elections of what exactly worked. So my understanding of what happened in the UP is from Sapa, which is the Samajwadi Party's point of view. Two things happened. One, I think they were pretty steadfast about the seat allocation, and I think they did that really smartly, both in terms of representation to a wider community group, including the disadvantaged communities, and about where they thought they had a stronger chance than Congress. And to give Congress credit, obviously they were open to that. So I think very good seat allocation. I think the second thing that the Samajwadi Party did and that worked really well is sort of changing their formula or approach a little bit and broadening it into becoming the scheduled tribe and scheduled caste community, the Muslim community, and the Yadav community. And I think they, kind of really created a campaign that was quite cohesive across many of these critical communities, and that worked quite well for them, evidently, in these elections. And the other thing I think is that. People I think didn't read the signs. They just didn't read the signs. Just as an example, Ayodhya as a constituency, this frequent bulldozing, pulling down homes. There is obviously the tilt to how tourism is going to completely transform that city. But I don't think anyone gave heed to what was happening at a very local level and the frustration that was building in people. And I think that has been very clearly evident in the way people voted. Manu?
Couple of points I want to make. Ruchir, I'm not sure if you said this the other way, but in Kerala, Congress did really well, not the Communist alliance. So the UDF won 18 out of the 20 seats that they contested. The Communist alliance, called the LDF, the Left Democratic Front, only won one, and NDA won the other seat. So
I said it the other way. I sorry, I meant to say
yeah.
UDF. But
So
as in overall, though, like in the sorry, the thing you can you clarify for me because I may not be updated on this. The split between Congress, like did Congress do well on its own?
yeah, Congress won 14 of the 16 seats they contested in Kerala.
Okay.
So, Congress have traditionally had a strong hold in Kerala. It's been Congress or the Communists. Now, of course, Pinari Vijayan broke that sort of, you know, um, AB sort of formula over the last 25 years or so by winning his second term, his consecutive term, and one of the first chief ministers to do so in Kerala. But notwithstanding that, again, Kerala, like Tamil Nadu, Congress numbers jump up when it's a national election, as opposed to it's a state election, right? So it is extremely understandable, and maybe that is a way to understand Delhi as well going forward. Maybe Delhi will vote for Aam Aadmi Party if it's a state election, but it's a national election. They definitely want to, go for BJP, and so that's how Kerala played out. Again, as Mitali said, Ayodhya, very interesting, but not totally shocking, because the person whom Akhilesh fielded there in Ayodhya was a 9-time MLA. So he's somebody who's been around, a very long time. And when you have people like that, and when there is anti-incumbency, or when there is a anger or opposition building, it's easier for somebody who's already established to make full use of it, or as they say, harvest it completely. So I think that's how I saw that playing. Of course, it's a fascinating story. The person who won Ayodhya is a Dalit leader from Samajwadi Party, and usually, because we have reserved seats, uh, the people from the Dalit community are not actually allowed to contest, or given a chance, an opportunity to contest by parties in other seats, right? So again, this is a very interesting that he contested from a what is called a general or a non-reserved constituency, and I think defeated the sitting incumbent BJP MP, who I think definitely there was a sort of a feeling that the entire temple project, the Ram temple project, was done not for the people of Ayodhya, but for everybody else, right? And a lot of discontentment and anger was harvested in the process of building, not just the temple, but everything around the temple, the destruction around the temple, the access to the temple, the highways, roads, shops, etc. So I think all of that has played a huge role in Ayodhya. And again, it's a reminder that when you come up with a big sort of project, unless the people who are living in that part of in that region are given priority, are given preference, are sort of their concerns are addressed, doesn't matter what project it is, they will ultimately vote you out. So I think that was the big sort of takeaway for me from Ayodhya as well. Was there anything else, Mitali, that you wanted to add with regard to the national election?
No, no, no. I just very quickly wanted to ask Ruchir, since he's a local lad, what he, what's the magic in Gujarat? Like, wow, what's working there and what continues to work there? Because industry-wise, it is becoming competitive and has always been with the state of Maharashtra and the rest of southern India. What's your reading of Gujarat?
I think the loyalty to Modi is really strong, and I think people have always misunderstood that more than anything else. The like even the state elections are more about Prime Minister Modi being in power at the center, and until Prime Minister Modi is around, I think BJP will continue to do well in Gujarat. So that it's very hard to undo. You know, you talk to anybody on the ground, they believe that what Modi did for Gujarat really made a difference. I'll say one story which I think is representative because it's anecdotal and sometimes things live in anecdotes. One of the things that always surprised me is that for a little while, a fair few Muslims in Gujarat were voting for BJP. And what I learned was this was because when after the 2002 riots, um, the riots in at least in Ahmedabad and Baroda used to happen quite frequently every few years, like every year or two. These riots would constantly happen, and then they stopped after the big riots. And when they stopped, people basically gave Modi that credit. But what was important that came out of it, like my own father, who used to have a shop in the old town, he would often not go to work because of those riots. And now, all of a sudden, you did not have the amount of disruption you used to have all the time. And so people saw that as such a positive sign to just being able to live and work and like not have people die regularly or be in fights in communal tensions regularly, that they were really grateful for the BJP government there. And obviously that was under the Modi, Prime Minister Modi. So the Muslims were grateful that they did not have to go through the situations that they were also fed up of, and so they were also voting for the BJP for a while. So that like the mood in Gujarat is extremely loyal to Prime Minister Modi. It's not necessarily extremely loyal to BJP, although like obviously now it is a BJP bastion and it's hard to undo. But the Prime Minister's brand there is super strong. I have a question for you, Mitali. Now that the elections are over, and obviously the new cabinet is in place, it looks like it's mostly the same set of ministers and same set of portfolios. How do you think about the economic policy moving forward? What are your thoughts on what the roadmap looks like for this new coalition government?
Yeah, I know we've chatted so much about the politics as we always do, so I'll go quickly through it. But the first thing that I just want to take a sledgehammer to that a statement approach that you keep hearing in the media, Ruchir, about oh, it's a coalition government, so it's a highly hemorrhaged government and it's a very restricted government. I mean, I just want to sort of walk back in history. July 1991, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. It was a coalition government. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister. This was the golden budget where economic liberalization was rolled out in India, removing license Raj. Deva Gowda led coalition government 1997, finance minister P. Chidambaram. Very, very sort of fractured situation over there. It's still called the dream budget because of the tax cuts that were announced for corporates, for the personal tax level, for foreign firms as well. Um, the BJP's own NDA-led governments, they took out a lot of really fantastic offerings, including the PM Gram Sadak Yojana started there. The IT Act of 2000, was born there, and then of course in 2006 the UPA coalition came out with what has been the backbone of the Indian economy, especially through COVID, which is Narega. So I think we really need to reassess what it is when we say coalition governments are holding governments, holding economic performance back. Because if you were to do an audit check of what this particular government has done by way of really large rollouts, one is GST, which was actually sort of in the oven for a long time but finally was rolled out under this government. And the other is the insolvency and bankruptcy code, which actually has also opened up quite a few flaws ever since being introduced. A lot of the big ordinances that they had planned, whether it was around rehabilitation and settlement when it comes to land acquisition, they got a lot of pushback on, and they couldn't. The farm laws, as we know, were also rolled back. So I'm not sure, that there's been anything really cramping this government with its economic policy so far. What I think would be really great is a couple of issues that they should address big time. I think jobs. We have talked so much about it in our conversations. I think now it's really emerging that there is a crisis there, and honestly speaking, that's not something that can be catered to through the public sector. The private sector will have to step up and provide more by way of jobs, which means manufacturing has to be encouraged. The other one I know we had a long debate around was that big, not dole out, I should absolutely not use that word, but that dividend that they got from the Reserve Bank, which was more than 2 trillion rupees. I think here's a lot of handy cash for the government to put into greater welfare, to put into capex spending. They have the benefit of that money. It's not what anyone had budgeted for. It's great to see they have it, and they should really put it to use. The next one, for the stock market, honestly, it's really not been great in terms of disinvestment offerings. One was LIC, which was quite a lemon in its pricing, and it took people 2 years to recover the price that they bought this IPO at. So I think it would be good to see something on those lines. And two more. One which I think Manu has spoken so passionately about in the past, which is the genuine federal structure of this government. There were such ugly spats happening between state finance ministers and the finance minister on what allocation looks like, what fair resource sharing looks like. And I really hope in that spirit of being a coalition led government, there is a much more rational approach to this conversation with a federal lens attached to it when you're talking about money and welfare for states. And the other one, Ruchir, this is really close to your heart. I mean, just imagine a situation where most of India goes out to vote in such searing heat that more than 33 people are killed or die, suspected of heat stroke, and that includes election officers who were on duty. We really need to be completely focused on what is happening in terms of climate change for our entire country. In some parts there is flooding, in some parts there's intense heat. And one interesting statistic for me is that by 2022, this government, the Modi government, had cleared close to 12,500 environmental clearances. It's a never before seen figure. And I think some really hard auditing needs to be done on clearances, how they are being given, why they are being given, and what the collateral damage is for the regions in which they are being given. So, it may sound great to have like headline numbers around climate change and net zero by this year and that year, but I think any government, honestly, at a state level or a central level, will have to contend with what is really in front of our eyes now. So that's my list. Manu, what does your list look like?
I'm going to throw it back to you, Mitali. Did you touch upon GST, because GST has now been in place for almost 7 years, right? And many people have started calling for a reformed GST, maybe some level of a slab rationalization, or something to move towards one uniform GST rate. Do you predict that is sort of on the anvil for the new government, or is that a priority at all?
I mean, the honest answer is I don't know, Manu. I do know that it has caused a lot of strife. For smaller sized entrepreneurs, it has been a complete logistical pain. And the other one on rationalization of slabs, as you said, it is crazy, at one level, that one product, say, I don't know, a bar of chocolate is being produced. The packaging is taxed at a different rate. The ingredients of the chocolate are taxed at a different rate. The GST charged on that finished product in wrapping paper is charged at a different rate. There has to be more rationalization of GST in order for it to work efficiently for people, and I really do hope that is done. uh, my sense, when I spoke to a lot of people in sort of accounting and auditing firms when GST was first rolled out under the then finance minister Arun Jaitley, was that it was in part sort of playing to optics, right? They wanted to be seen as rolling it out, and the directives were just get this going. Whether or not there are chinks, whether or not there are, errors showing up, just get this going. So I think now, having seen it in place for so long, it's honestly not a bad time to sit down and reassess, okay, what's working in this and what isn't. But I think, Ruchir, you may have lived experience here, and you can speak
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah, I mean, simply like what you said is correct in that, for example, we build solar plants and our GST is on average 13.8% because of how the modules are taxed versus how, say, the rest of the materials are taxed and so on. So, yeah, that is a problem. The thing I really don't like is the way the government approaches every business in a punitive way. It's like if you don't file by this date, you will be in jail. And that is really scary. I mean, should we pay our taxes? Yes, but like, don't make me afraid of the whole system, right? Like, help me file it, help me, like, support me in what needs to be done, but don't um, carry a stick behind me. I think on the wider the 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 wider space, I often think about, what sort of drives not just jobs but sort of growth. And one of the challenges we always think about in India is, if there is, say, a welfare scheme, there are all these layers. So the person at the end of that scheme gets 4% or 8% or 12% of the actual intended amount, for example, for a range of reasons, right? Like not just corruption but bureaucracy and so on. I often wonder, like, if we have a big infrastructure agenda, say a big, I mean, to your point, Mitali, around the clean energy ecosystem, like a big agenda around investing in the green economy, skilling people up, investing in infrastructure that obviously BJP has been very big about, and they've always wanted more money in airports and transportation and so on and so forth. But like, as a program, given where we are and jobs being a problem, can a government meaningfully, given the size and the scale of our problem, actually have a strong infrastructure and jobs agenda? Is it even physically possible for them to pull that off? That's a question I'd love both your thoughts on.
I would actually love to hear from Manu on that, because if I'm not mistaken, that has been part of the approach for the government in Tamil Nadu, right, Manu?
Yeah, so there's two ways I think we've sort of, I think, dealt with this in the past. One is, so of course, the creation of jobs, creation of opportunities, but then also creating or fostering a trained and skilled workforce, right? And one of the big Congress manifesto items, if you remember, was the apprenticeship plan, right? To provide a lot of apprenticeship skilling opportunities. Now that's something that I think, I don't know what the equivalent policy platform in the new government is going to be, but I read somewhere, and I don't know if this data is accurate, but what I remember reading, I think this was in the Economic Times, was that uh, in comparison to a country like South Korea, which has about 75 or 80% skilled population, the equivalent number in India, or proportion in India, is about 5 to 10%. So really, in terms of upskilling, that is where a lot of sort of effort and capital needs to be prioritized, and really skilling India's human capital is should be a priority. Of course, at the same time creating the right kind of jobs, but jobs creation is just one part of the equation. So that is something that we've felt here in Tamil Nadu also, ensuring that people get the right kind of training even after they leave college, or even while they are in college. So when they get into the job market, they are skills ready, they are jobs ready, they're able to sort of not spend the first 6 months being trained for a job, right? But they should be market ready. So I don't know if that sort of answers or helps your narrative, Mitali, but do you want to take it from there?
No, I think you raise a really important point, Manu, and that's the thing, Ruchir. You have to start thinking about upskilling. You have to start thinking about the fact that there are so many millions of youth in India, just literally, like going through a strainer. There's higher education, then there's a college degree, then there's a master's or an MA after that. And when they emerge from there, are they truly job ready? I think that's one question that, honestly, if not a government, then who, needs to address what is the quality of skilling. That's one. And the other is that there are very real economic shifts. I mean, from last year onwards, it's been really clear that technology companies, for instance, are not recruiting the way they did. The stated policy for many of them, and they've shared that in their annual reports, is that when someone has quit, they're basically not replacing those positions. So many of these large pools are not pulling as much of their weight as they did. And I think that needs some serious policy thought, and I really hope that the government turns to its economic advisory council that may now have more time on their hands, rather than coming out with half baked reports about which religious population is growing how, but put their mind to issues like this, because that is honestly it does lie on their shoulders.
I have one more question, which is obviously, how much of our GDP is in agriculture versus how much of it the employment happens there. I think I read somewhere, hopefully the data is not wrong, but I believe that 16 or 17% of our GDP is from agriculture, but 45% of our employment is in agriculture. Um, I think Prime Minister, the first scheme that he announced after taking office or taking oath was the Kisan scheme, which gives, I think, 6,000 rupees to farmers every year. Um, the thing that I was worried about there was, we're not necessarily thinking about how do we transition farmers or how do we transition people out away from the agriculture economy to the wider economy, but we're basically providing more support there. Uh, any thoughts on that specific aspect, especially either the prime minister's first action or like how do we tackle moving people out of agriculture or
So
make
just to
agriculture more productive?
Yeah, and just to clarify, actually, and I wish, sort of news media would now do its due diligence. This is an existing scheme, Ruchir. So it was not a new scheme. It's an existing scheme that is just rolled forward, where the installments now continue. Some of these installments to farmers have actually been delayed, and they amount to what I think about 500 rupees a month, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't have that figure, pat. uh, the other thing I think that really needs to be readdressed is this narrative of, welfare spending is equal to revenue, as the prime minister said, is equal to dole outs. uh, these are sort of natural levers that need to be in place for a country that is dealing with deep inequity. Part of the reason why the workforce in agriculture is so high is because some of this is a post COVID legacy. Scores of migrants moved back into their villages. So more and more people became dependent on that one piece of land to be tilling it, or to be, getting some sort of economic output out of it. And they've frankly just stayed there, with no other recourse to anything more meaningful as employment. Ditto for Narega, where there has been a continuous stream of people signing up for Narega. So, should there be a better option? Yes. Has it been addressed? No. Is welfare, a wasted cause? I certainly don't think so. And honestly, I think it needs to be more efficient, it needs to be wider, and it needs to be more thoughtful. Manu?
So, the agrarian economy question is something very interesting. As Ruchir pointed out, this is a sort of a stat that has been repeatedly used, right? Like, disproportionate number of people are in agriculture as opposed to the its contribution to the GDP or our economic sort of outcomes. Um, I think the piece there, Ruchir, which I've always thought, and over the last few years, is how much of a difference technology would play once it starts getting into, what we call ag tech or agri tech, right? And again, I think it is a little disappointing that in India we still haven't seen companies sort of come up in the ag tech space. I know Godrej and a few others are doing work towards that, some of the bigger ones, but really there's been none that has, been a trailblazer in that sense. And in terms of ag tech or food tech, and of course, I think bringing data analytics, bringing sort of biotech, bringing sustainability related thinking, bringing automation into agriculture, that sort of needs to be somewhat facilitated and catalyzed by the government, right? And I hope the government in we have now will start thinking along those lines, and there may be some answers to your questions from the government on those, Ruchir, because that's the reality, that we see in the world around us now. Like every country, including Australia, is really sort of pushing ag tech through. So maybe that therein lies, something that we might be able to see the where the agrarian economy will start sort of producing GDP, producing sort of economic outcomes that are commensurate with the number of people who are involved.
Shall we move to have you heard? Um,
Go for it,
who was?
Ruchir. I think
Yes,
you
yes,
deserve to start.
yes.
If I feel like if I go first, I'll steal Mitali's "Have you heard," which is the Roger Federer speech at Dartmouth University.
No, 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 no,
Um,
no. Take it, take it, take it, take it, take it. It wasn't mine. No, take
okay, great,
it.
great. I'm glad. Such good life advice. The speech itself is worth it, but he makes a point which I thought was so wonderful. Like Roger Federer obviously has won so many matches in his career. The stat is close to 80% in terms of the number of matches that he's won. But then he stopped in his speech and asked, "How many points did you think I won? The individual points in these matches?" And the answer is 54%. And he points out that the thing that's really incredible about amazing players, amazing sports people, but amazing people in life is they all being focused on the point that you're playing now or about to play. It was really good advice. I thought it was one of the most wonderful things I've heard. I play paddle, so I also apply it in my day-to-day games. That was my have you heard. Mitali, you want to go next?
Manu, you go next.
I was going to say, Richard, that was my have you heard as well,
Oh
but
no.
but the thing is, I think it was such a good speech, and I think it brought out, of course, uh, various philosophies of life, but also really uh, showed us once again, like what a interesting personality Roger Federer is, that he did not mind after all these years bringing up one of his worst ever sort of defeats against Nadal in Wimbledon 2008 finals to sort of tell people, how to sort of play the match but then get move on, right? I think he calls it's just a point. So you play the point, he says you give it everything, but at the end of the day it's just a point, you must move on and go to the next one. And the other one that I really liked is, how we all say Roger Federer effortless, right? And he actually made it into a life lesson. He said, in order to be effortless, like you just have to put in so much effort, and it's so true, and it applies to so many of us. But I did expect one of the two of you will bring up the Dartmouth college commencement speech, so I did have a backup have you heard, and this is again in tennis, but this is on Carlos Alcaraz, the Roland Garros Grand Slam champion this year. And again, we've been speaking about various tennis players, but I was just looking at stats that make Alcaraz like a true sort of heir to the Federer, Nadal, Djokovic era, right? And after seeing three of possibly the best ever, you almost think there cannot be another one in our lifetime, because we got three when a lot of people just got one, or maybe two at best, right? But it almost seems like we've got another, all-time great here, because Alcaraz, is the second youngest person after John McEnroe to reach 100 career wins. Okay, so in 2023, he won his 100th match. Uh, and in the process, Alcaraz in 2022 became the youngest ever player to become the ATP men's world number one at the age of 19 years and 4 months. And after winning the Roland Garros last week, Alcaraz became the youngest ever player to win um, a Grand Slam on all the three different surfaces. So, hard court when he won the US Open in 2022, grass when he won Wimbledon in 2023, and of course, clay when he won French Open in 2024. So, there you go. So, I thought, one of you would bring up the Federer speech. So, I had one to say, we have someone who could even outdo Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal in the years to come.
Great.
Well
Mitali?
done, Manu. Very tactical, and it's really funny, Ruchir. When I was picking out my "Have you heard," I was literally thinking this is such a Ruchir "Have you heard," but I found it interesting as well. So I want to talk about this Chinese company called Shein, and I don't know if both of you have heard of it, but I think anyone who has a young teenager or is a young woman, or even frankly, beyond the age of 20 or 30, Shein is this website, and it's China owned, that makes essentially and mostly fashion for women, and sells it at incredibly low prices. So you would get, like, blouses and t-shirts for as little as $5, and you could get dresses for about $10. And the big story about Shein is that it is now hitting the market with an IPO, and no one really has a clear idea of their revenues because they've been quite cagey about it. But it's possible that in this year could hit revenues of $50 billion, which would be almost a 50% jump from previous years. And this model has worked so incredibly for Shein in terms of its pricing, that they've really cleaned out a lot of their competitors. Of course, this has come with a lot of pushback about, you know, how they run their operations, how they treat their labor, um, the labor working conditions, the sort of how environmentally sustainable or responsible they are. But I think it's just a phenomenon in terms of both the fashion world and also the incredible size and muscle of one company. So I've been tracking the Shein IPO, and the interesting India connection for people who may remember it is that in June 2020, I don't know if you remember, when there were clashes and a border dispute between India and China, the Indian government chose to ban some apps. And amongst all those 55, 58 apps, Shein was one of the apps that was banned. That was then reversed 2 years later, but only on the condition that this online fashion giant would re-enter India only after it signed a strategic licensing deal with, drumroll, Reliance Industries. So I thought this was a really fascinating kind of turn and twist, not just for Shein, but how businesses in India have to find a way in, and generally the way in is via just a couple of doors, let's say. So that's my "Have you heard."
I didn't realize how big it was, Mitali. I had heard of it, but wow. And they're about to IPO. Wow. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
insane.
yeah, they're huge.
Um, well, there you have it. That's episode 19 of the India Dialogue. Thank you so much for listening to us. As always, we're super grateful for your feedback. Thank you for sending messages when you do. Please send more, but also always open to criticisms. Please do send in any thoughts you may have. We're at indiadialoguepodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on X. We are at TID underscore podcast. That's the India Dialogue underscore podcast. Or we are on YouTube at India Dialogue Podcast YouTube channel. Mitali is at Mitali Live. Manu is at Manuraj1983. I'm at Ruchir underscore P. All of this on x.com, formerly Twitter. Thank you so much for listening in, and see you all next time. Bye.